too. I'm Claire Say, a member of the Board of Trustees at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Reston. We are so glad you are with us this morning. Hope with all the current events around COVID and the severe weather, that you will make space and grace to enjoy nature's beauty and snow, where you can find joy with your inner child, your family, and your friends. You need to breathe in and out because that will release some of your stress, because chronic stress will actually shrink your brain. We are grateful you joined us from all generations, from children through elders, where you are on your spiritual journey, how you identify, and whom you love. Please know you are always welcome here. The announcement today is the 6th to 8th graders are meeting on Zoom at 12:30 p.m. today. Parents and caregivers of children in pre-K through 8th grade are meeting at 7 p.m. tomorrow to provide input into revised program plans for this winter. Please attend. Look in your email for links for both Zoom meetings or contact Linda Weaver directly. Our service today is being led by Reverend Scott Alexander. We are also joined this morning by Linda Weaver, our Director of Religious Education, and Cynthia Young, our Music Director. Jesse Leong is our accompanist, and David Niemi is serving as the Worship Associate today. Also, Ron Bracy, David Niemi, and Mike Schmitt, plus Amelia Turner are running the technical side of the worship. Thank you all for participating in today's worship service. We couldn't do it without you. Our chat host, Usher, is Nonnie Mullin. Now let us center ourselves for worship. Please take some deep qualitative breaths with me. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. We ask you to breathe because your breathing is telling your brain to relax and to be centered on this beautiful music as we enter our time of worship together, and enjoy the Dali Suite, Opus 56 for piano duet by Gabrielle Farr, and performed by Cynthia Young and Jesse Leong.
Thank you, Jesse and Cynthia. That was beautiful. On this Piano Dedication Sunday, you'll be hearing more about that in just a moment. We welcome you. By the way, it looks like we've dodged the freezing rain bullet this morning. It'll be perhaps a little rain this afternoon, but here in Reston, it's calm and safe. Our opening words on this Piano Dedication Sunday come from the 11th century Persian mystic Rumi, who writes, "Why is there always music in this house? Here is a treasure the world could not contain, a house of love with no limits. Come in, the beloved is here. Don't sit outside wondering. Here is all mercy and love." Our opening hymn when in our music.
We invite you now to join us in singing our opening hymn, number 36 in your hymnal, When in Our Music. This was especially chosen for our piano dedication service. The words will be in your chat box, so please do sing along with me and Jesse.
Today's chalice lighting words come to us from Reverend Dr. Sidney Freeman. Only a few things wear the mark of the eternal: the giving we have invested in others, the love we have expressed in deeds, the kindness we have shown, the work we have done because we loved it, the light we have shown that others may not stumble, the evil we have turned into good because we saw that none of us live apart, but all are members of one another.
In our church, we recommit to each other every Sunday by singing our covenant together. Love is the spirit of this church. The words will appear in the video. We will be singing along with our choir and our congregation in a beautiful virtual video that we made last year. If you are new to us and visiting for the first time this morning, we hope you will accept this song as our blessing to you.
Love is the spirit of this church, and Good morning. Our story today is The Heartless King. It's based on an Indian wisdom tale adapted by 20th century UU religious educator Sophia Lyon Faz. Once, there was a very rich king who had grown his wealth from charging his people very high taxes. And because of that, they had grown poorer and poorer. The king had a huge, beautiful palace, while the people who built it had run-down shacks. The king's table was piled high with delicious foods, while most of the people in his kingdom only ate one simple meal a day, if they even had that. One day, a hunter came to the kingdom with an enormous dog. The king liked hunting and was fascinated by the dog, so they were invited into the palace. The dog wasn't an ordinary dog. She had a huge bark like the roar of thunder, and the first time she opened her mouth and barked, it shook the palace and frightened the king and everyone in it. The barking became louder and louder and more frequent until nobody in the palace could hear anything else. The king was disturbed and called the hunter, and he said, "Why does your dog bark with such a deafening roar?" And the hunter said, "The dog is hungry." So the king ordered a plate full of meat to be brought in. And let's pretend that this is our huge dog with the enormous bark. The dog ate the food quickly and then started barking again. Over and over, it ate food that the king ordered, and it barked and barked. Can you pretend, maybe try and see if you can make a roaring bark like this dog? Go ahead and do that in your home. Nice, thank you. This really upset the king, so he called back the hunter and said, "You and your dog must leave. We can't endure this deafening noise any longer." And the hunter said, "We were sent by someone greater than you, and we cannot leave." The king was furious and frightened and said, "Will nothing stop your dog from barking?" The hunter answered, "There are people in this kingdom who take all the food for themselves, and because of that, there are people without food who go hungry. And this dog feels that hunger and will continue to bark as long as anyone in the kingdom is hungry." Well, the king had never considered that he should think of anyone else. He was the king, after all. Why should he? And he was angry. He called in his wise advisors and asked them, "What should I do?" The advisors went off and talked among themselves. They thought and thought, but they could only come up with two solutions. Either someone would have to kill the dog, which no one was willing to do, or everyone in the kingdom would have to be fed. The advisors went to the king and told them what had to be done. The king didn't hesitate. He commanded, "Go to my stores and get all the rice and pile it onto carts. Go into my cupboards, get meats, and into my gardens for vegetables and fruit, and put that on the carts. Then send my servants out with all of these carts to every village and town, and make sure that everyone gets food." Day after day, the carts rolled through the kingdom until everyone had food, and the dog stopped barking. I wonder what you might do if you feel or see the hunger or pain of others, or when you hear the bark of injustice.
Thank you, Linda. That's a great and meaningful story. Before we share our joys and sorrows this morning, a word, if I might, about my sermon this morning on the importance of human empathy. I will begin the sermon with a true but difficult story of survival during the Holocaust. That's just a warning for young ears. So now is the time in our service when we share our joys and concerns so that no one in our community or beyond has to hold them alone. If you are joining us remotely this morning, which most of you are, you may wish to light a real or virtual candle wherever you are this morning to mark what is on your heart. As I light candles in the sanctuary bowl, symbolic of all of our joys and sorrows out there. And if you at home would like to share something in the chat, on the Zoom with others who are attending this service, please write to all attendees, but please remember that what you write will be public. Please read each other's joys and sorrows at home and enter into your own time of reflection and prayer. We do continue to send our love and thoughts out to everyone who is adversely affected either by the weather in these winter times and, of course, the continuing epidemic of Omicron. And now, as I light the candles, Jesse will play music for this time. Let us be one in the spirit of prayer and meditation, spirit of life and love that so vividly animates our creation. We are grateful for this community that is faithfully with us now in both times of joy and sorrow. We hold in our hearts all who are grieving, all facing illness or disability or any difficulty of a loved one or a friend. Whether shared here this morning or held silently in our hearts, may our joys be multiplied here in community, and may all who gather here with us find comfort and calm this day. Amen.
Okay, the second Sunday of each month is our dedicated offering to an organization chosen by the Social Justice and Action Committee. All of today's offerings, except for pledge payments, which should be clearly marked, will go to Reston Pride. Reston Pride is a local, grassroots, Northern Virginia organization focused on a truly inclusive Reston through engagement. It provides inclusive cultural education, community outreach, and resources for and about the LGBTQIA+ community and straight allies of Reston and surrounding communities. Reston Pride's emphasis is to enhance the LGBTQIA+ visibility and advocacy by bringing a sense of community to families, youth, and people of all sexualities and backgrounds. Reston Pride grew out of the first ever Reston Pride event in 2018 that was sponsored by and held at UUCR and was attended by almost 1,200 individuals. Subsequently, Reston Pride festivals have taken place on Lake Ann Plaza and have attracted even more attendees. You may make your donation at the link in the chat box. You may also mail a check to the church with Reston Pride noted in the memo. Thank you all for your generous support of Reston Pride.
Thank you, Jesse. Today, we are so happy to be formally dedicating our new sanctuary piano. This gorgeous Yamaha C3 6-foot and 1-inch grand piano that we have right here. Finding this beautiful instrument and bringing it into this beloved space was a journey involving many dedicated volunteers, an incredible outpouring of generosity from so many of you, months of searching, and lots of patience. In 2019, the board and your minister at that time, the Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner, decided that a special way to celebrate and honor UUCR's upcoming 50th anniversary would be with the installation of a new sanctuary piano, one which this congregation could enjoy for the next 50 years. The music committee at that time organized a fabulously successful fundraiser starting in January of 2020. The enthusiasm from the congregation was remarkable and a testament to the importance of music to the life of UUCR. That music committee was Wendy Katz, Tracy Hedges, and David Niemi. We owe them a huge and heartfelt thank you. Those three people got everyone on board, and with all of your help and the generosity of one leadership donor, who we are going to hear from in just a moment, raised $20,000. Many of you have lovely piano pins to wear as a sign that you contributed to this wonderful project. It was an exciting time. The music committee created a large poster of a keyboard, which was displayed on the wall in the foyer. And as donations were made, $50 per key, the keys were each colored in, and we could see our piano taking shape right before our eyes. So again, a huge thank you to Wendy, Tracy, and David, and to all 74 of you out there who bought keys and made this purchase possible. Because of the pandemic, we were unable to purchase the piano right away. However, a year later, in the spring of 21, another committee was formed, the Piano Search Committee. Those members were Philip Kancianik, Jesse Leong, Charles Nazar, and David Niemi, again, whose name is being mentioned quite a bit this morning, and also Claire Tse. After a few months of looking at pianos that were not at all what we dreamed of, the committee decided to hire a consultant, Alan Naylor, who located this piano at Orpheus Music Store in McLean. It was love at first sight. We knew this was the piano meant for us. So thank you to the Piano Search Committee. The piano was brought to UUCR from McLean and has spent the last few months settling in here. Everyone who plays it has been very delighted. It is not only beautiful to behold, but also beautiful to listen to. None of this would have happened without the generosity of one very important person, our leadership donor, a church member, and today's board host, Claire Tse. Claire came forward in the fall of 2019 to say that she wanted to make a significant gift to our new piano, and that she had very special people she would like to dedicate this gift to. Her dedication is being engraved on a plaque, which will hang here behind our piano in the sanctuary. We have a mock-up of that plaque right here, which we are going to give Claire this morning, and I'm going to read it to you. See if you can see. This is what our beautiful plaque will look like. And it says, "Our sanctuary piano was made possible by generous donations from 74 members and friends of this church, and with the leadership of Claire Tse, who dedicates this piano to her parents, Anne Ong and Calvin S. Tse, and to her dear friend, Denny Shaw. In loving memory, January 9th, 2022. Thank you. At the bottom of the plaque is a quote from the hymn that we sang this morning, hymn number 36, and the quote reads, "Making music, we have found a new dimension in the world of sound, as worship moved us to a more profound Alleluia." Claire, thank you so much for making the dream of this piano a reality for our congregation.
Your heart and really spark on your brain. That's what we heard when I was a child listening to our AM transistor radio, because my parents from Hong Kong and Malaysia came to this country, and I was the firstborn of an immigrant family, and we always had music. I didn't know what the words were because English was not my first language. And so as I learned the language, I learned the lyrics of the music. So start thinking about how you can instill that joy of music in your family. And I wanted to, I was taught to be humble, so I'm a little bit overwhelmed here. And also, I wanted to honor my parents. I wanted to, thank you, to honor my parents who really instilled the music, and even on their last days on earth, they enjoyed the music. Also, my dear Denny Shaw brought me back to this church, as well as Charles Nazar, who said, come here, because you need to celebrate your spirituality with other people, not just at your home. Because I couldn't find a church here coming, for 20 years. And so, I came here, I left, I came back, and I stayed. So thank you all to this welcoming community, and also everyone that enjoys the music. And in that spirit, Jesse is going to play a special music on Asseles Liebestad, from Tristan and Isolde, Richard Wagner, transcribed by piano for Franz Liszt, and then congratulations on your graduation. Okay.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, so the last time I played this piece, I was a senior in my undergraduate, so a very long time ago, and it was one of the last times I performed solo piano in public, so this piece is kind of special to me. It is from an opera and called Tristan und Isolde, which is very famous and has had a ton of influence on other composers and poets and artists in the 20th century, is based on a 12th century romance or legend about like English nobles, and this piece right here, and love potion and knights and courtly drama and all that kind of stuff. So this piece is called Isolde's Liebestod, which means a love death, and this takes place at the very end of the 4-hour opera, where she is singing over the love of her of Tristan, her lover, who has just been killed. And I'll read you the brief lyrics, which, the translation, it's originally in German. The lyrics are, softly and gently how he smiles, how his eyes fondly open. Do you see, friends, do you not see how he shines even brighter? Star haloed rising higher, do you not see? To drown, to founder, unconscious, utmost bliss. So the piano transcription of this piece was done by Franz Liszt, a friend of Richard Wagner's, and who authored the Joys and Concerns music, the Constellation in D-flat major, and it's a pretty direct transcription of the original aria, the famous aria Isolde's Liebestod. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
Oh, Jesse, that was truly wonderful. Thank you so much. I think it came through just as well at home as it did here in this room. Just beautiful, beautiful music. A shift of gears. May your pillow catch fire. Early on the morning of August 14th, 1942, Nazi soldiers surrounded the Jewish ghetto in the town of Bobowa, Poland, and began rounding up all the men, women, and children. Terrified and still in his pajamas, 12-year-old Samuel Oleiner hid on a roof and watched the terrible chaos below. Here, in his own words, are what happened next. After several hours, which seemed like a lifetime, I escaped from the ghetto. Peasants along the way told me what had happened. The trucks had taken the others, including my entire family, to a forest. There, the Nazi soldiers forced them to undress in the most vile and humiliating way, and then made them walk about 60 feet across huge planks laid across a mass grave. They then shot them and watched them fall into the grave. It took 18 hours to kill 1,000 people and bury them with a thin coat of soil. After that, Samuel went on, I wandered around the countryside for 3 days, dazed and in disbelief. I slept in barns or in fields and ate food off the land. Finally, I decided to go across the hills to the village of Bystra, where a Catholic woman named Belwina Pajciuch lived. Belwina knew my family before the war. When I knocked on her door one night, Belwina immediately recognized me. She knew what had happened at Bobowa. She saw how scared and disheveled I was, took me in and comforted me, hugged me, fed me, and offered me to let me sleep in the attic. As I climbed the stairs, Belwina said, crying, "You poor boy, I will help. You must live." Belwina changed my name and taught me how to pretend to be a Catholic and helped me find a job at a nearby farm. And thus it was, Samuel Oleiner reports, that I survived the war. And then Oleiner goes on. Belwina Pajciuch's act of kindness, compassion, and bravery not only saved my life, it formed my life. I emigrated to the United States, became a sociologist, and spent my career working to understand what motivates altruists like Belwina and the hundreds of thousands of other people during the war who put the welfare of others alongside of their own. Here is a picture of the eminent sociologist Dr. Samuel Oleiner, who at 91 years of age just died this past November 17th. Dr. Oleiner, after receiving a PhD from the University of California, became a professor of sociology at Humboldt State University and a pioneer thinker who has devoted his long and distinguished career to the study of altruism and compassion and empathy in human beings. And what, might you ask, has Dr. Oleiner discovered about good people like his saver, Belwina Pajciuch? After he and his research team founded at the Humboldt State University, interviewed more than 1,500 what have come to be known as the righteous Gentiles, those brave non-Jewish Europeans who risked everything and endangered their own lives to rescue Jews from the Nazis, he concluded that the one defining human quality these exceptionally compassionate people all shared was that of empathy. Empathy for others. It was empathy, pure and simple, that made these people so brave. Again, Oleiner in his own words, we found a clear correlation between empathy and altruistic behavior. These helpers of humanity simply could not stand by and see others suffer. Altruists, unlike the bystanders who did not help, had internalized an ethic of caring and social responsibility, which they had learned, importantly, from their parents and other adult models. They all shared, he writes, the capacity for love and compassion. Now, as a religious leader who's been thinking about our impossibly complex and difficult human drama for over half a century now, I am persuaded that empathy is one of the most important spiritual and ethical possessions a human being can have. Empathy is something we must both cherish and teach in our religious communities, and most certainly pass on, Linda, to our children and families here at UUCR. Again, Samuel Oliner's words, "Moral behavior is the consequence of empathy, caring for others, a strong attachment to the moral community, and an ethical obligation to all life, reaching out to others at considerable personal risk, as Balwina Pajcic did to me as a terrified 12-year-old, and as many others have done, has been the force behind much that is good in the world. It has saved immeasurable lives and inspired new acts of generosity and heroism." The work of Samuel Oliner and his research team, along with other researchers in this field, has persuaded me that, in fact, empathy, that quiet, unostentatious quality of the heart, is the spiritual prerequisite for compassionate and humane behavior. It is people infused with the simple, heartfelt empathy for their fellow human beings who naturally act in compassionate and protective ways. Said simply, it is most often the empathy we find in our hearts which empowers us to be good and caring human beings, not to mention a more humane society. But not everyone in our culture agrees with or believes in the importance of empathy in human affairs, as is evidenced by presidential politics over recent years. Perhaps some of you remember more than a decade ago, during the confirmation process for Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor in 2009, that President Obama was harshly criticized by some in Congress for saying that one of the qualities he was looking for in a nominee for the court was empathy. It was as if these congressmen, yes, all older, privileged men, white men, equated empathy with sentimentality and the excesses of a, quote, bleeding heart liberal. The assumption seemed to be that a compassionate justice would be a weak and unreliable Supreme Court justice. More recently in American politics, and now I know I'm venturing into sensitive waters, perhaps for some, but the truth is that for the 4 years between 2016 and 2020, we had a leader in the White House, you all know who I'm talking about, who systematically has exhibited an almost total lack and toxic lack of empathy toward any others, most especially those discriminated against or disadvantaged in our society. Let me quote conservative writer Michael Gerson of the Washington Post. You all know his great writing. Conservative, who in an editorial in 2020 wrote, we've officially witnessed the total failure of empathy in presidential leadership. In this editorial, he pointed out that at a time in our national life when empathy is desperately needed for all Americans facing hardship, Mr. Trump, because of his, as Mr. Gerson puts it, defects of heart and character, proved himself completely unable to even be the slightest bit empathetic toward others, whether toward those who have died or lost their jobs because of the corona pandemic, or those suffering terrible loss during a hurricane in Puerto Rico, or western wildfires in California. I quote again Mr. Gerson, "The United States is now in desperate need of empathetic leadership. Empathetic leadership serves the purpose of reassuring vulnerable people that someone is on their side. It is not particularly helpful," Gerson goes on, "to urge this particular president to grow a soul. He seems totally incapable of such. But empathy in times of crisis is not some sort of pleasant altruistic add-on. It is the manner by which a nation's suffering is given purpose, and a method of assuring the vulnerable that they will not be forgotten." And then Gerson ends, "If any president cannot feel it, he or she needs to fake it." Now, luckily, 14 months ago, the American people elected a new president, a noticeably kinder and seasoned politician who over his long career has consistently shown himself capable of feeling and expressing empathy toward others, Mr. Biden. And what is true of American presidents is true for all of us. Regardless of your station or status in society, empathy is one of the most important personal possessions you can have. But with all that said about the importance of empathy, the question quickly becomes, well, what precisely is empathy? And is empathy something we can purposefully cultivate in our spiritual lives and further teach and instill in our children? Let's begin by defining empathy, looking at the etymology of the word itself. The English word empathy comes from the Greek word empathia. Empathia, the human quality of feeling into or feeling with, which literally means feeling into. Empathy, then, is the human quality of feeling into or feeling with the situation of another. It is a much stronger human connection to others than sympathy, which I think of as the quality of feeling about or from a distance of what another person is going through. I feel sympathy for you, kind of over on the side. While sympathy is an important level of human caring, empathy goes deeper and gets closer and motivates us to actually do something tangible to relieve the suffering of others. I like the way my colleague, Richard Gilbert from Rochester, New York, puts it. Empathy, which is feeling the feeling of others, is at the core of kindness. It is the irrational root of ethics. It is the central ingredient in human compassion. And then he goes on. The word compassion comes from the Latin com, meaning together, and pati, meaning to suffer. Thus, the word means literally to suffer together. In German, the word is Mitleid, feeling the misfortune of the other. There are times, he writes, when our only response to others' pain is to share in it. Sorrow shared is sorrow halved, as the old German saying goes. And then Richard goes on. Empathy then comes from a feeling of deep sympathy for another and is accompanied by the strong desire to alleviate the pain or remove its cause. Sympathy, feeling pity, turns to empathy, feeling with, and finally issues in action to serve the needs of the neighbor, unquote. And empathy at its best, I think, is not some complicated, rational, intellectual process, as it is more a simple emotional one. I am reminded about the story of the 9-year-old girl who was sent by her mother for a loaf of bread at a store that was a short 5-minute walk down the street from where they lived. When the 9-year-old had not returned home with the bread after half an hour, the mother grew worried. Just as she was about to set out to see what became of her daughter to the store, the girl bounded in the door with the loaf of bread. "What on earth kept you so long?" the mother asked. The daughter answered, "Oh, well, on the way back from the store, I came upon a boy who had fallen off his bike and had hurt his leg. I had to stop to help him cry." Empathy, then, pure and simple, is the quality of compassionately feeling with or into another's predicament or pain, and because of that close identification, causes us to do something compassionate about it. So empathy leads to goodness, and the absence of or lack of empathy in the heart, conversely, can lead to great human evil. I had a wise and earnest old colleague on Cape Cod, the Reverend Peter Fleck, who said to me on his deathbed, he too, a survivor, a Dutch Jew, survivor of the Holocaust. On his deathbed, he was talking to one of his own ministers, and she asked him what his years in ministry had taught him. And he said, "I have been convinced that human evil is only possible if you look into the eyes of another human being and do not see God there." As a Unitarian Universalist committed to the theological idea of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, I am persuaded that this is powerfully true. If we do not see our beautiful human connectedness, our sharing of oneness, when we look into another's eyes, then we can do and will do great evil to another. Back when I was senior minister over in Bethesda at our River Road congregation, it was reported in the Washington Post that one Friday afternoon in a busy rush hour, an emotionally distraught woman had climbed over the railing of a high bridge on Interstate 95 over the Rappahannock River, down where the traffic mess was last week during the snowstorm. As a state police negotiator tried to talk this distraught woman into his arms, impatient motorists whose commuting trip home that evening had been delayed began yelling from their cars, "Jump, jump," which the woman finally did. Evil happens when we look into the predicament or the eyes of another and do not see ourselves there. But as real as such acts of indifferent cruelty are in human affairs, let me quickly flip this theological and ethical observation back to the positive, for that's where we need to be. For it is where I want to take us this morning. Another positive way of saying all this is human goodness and compassion blessedly can happen and does happen when we look into the eyes of another and see the reflections of God or creation's highest and holiest realities. What Balwina Paitruch saw when the knock came at her door with that 12-year-old scared boy was not some subhuman creature to hate as the Nazis would have had her, but simply a fellow human being on life's difficult, hard road with her. She saw a child of God to protect. All right, so we now know what human empathy is. But to me, the crucial question for our purposes this morning becomes, can we cultivate, nurture empathy in our own hearts? Or is it something we're just naturally born with or born without? Was Donald Trump born without a heart? Were you born with a heart? What goes on here? Well, the good news here is that there's a lot of evidence that empathy is a quality that can be cultivated. The good news is that empathy is a natural, hardwired human quality. First, it seems clear that we are all naturally born with it. In his wonderful book, Emotional Intelligence, Dr. Daniel Grohlman asserts that all human beings come into the world with a strong empathetic impulse. Quote, "The roots of empathy can be traced to infancy. Virtually from the day we are born, infants are upset when they hear another infant crying. Infants feel empathetic distress even before they fully realize that they exist apart from other people. A response," he writes, "that is the earliest precursor of empathy." And Dr. Harvey Hornstein, in his important book, Cruelty and Kindness, asserts that parents, teachers, and other adult role models who model empathetic and compassionate behavior can and do produce more altruistic and empathetic children. I quote him, "The development of empathetic, altruistic dispositions in children is very much contingent on the quality of parental behavior that the child observes." All children have great crap detectors, and if you are not being true to your values, they notice it. Parents, he writes, who shower their children with rewarding hugs, kisses, hugs, and squeals after they witness acts of generosity by their children are more likely to be real empathetic children than those who are more cruelly or dispassionately treated. Again, in his interviews with the righteous Gentiles who saved Jews during World War II, Samuel Oleiner discovered that these brave and empathetic individuals had in fact learned empathy from their parents. One person said, "My parents taught me to respect all human beings. My parents," another rescuer said, "taught me discipline, tolerance, and service to others, and when they need something." I am pleased to tell you that a few years ago, When I first began formulating this sermon and thinking about these issues, I was able to have a conversation with Dr. Oleiner himself. Some of you who have known me, I was not born with the shyness gene. So when I read his work, I looked him up on the internet and I found a phone number for him at Humboldt State University, and I dialed the number and I got a tape machine. And I told him I was working with his work, and I sent him the sermon by internet, and 2 days later he called me back. And he and I had a long conversation, about a half an hour, and he said to me this in his thick Polish accent that he still had, Reverend Alexander, that was the accent. Then I'll switch to my own accent. I'm very much an optimist about human behavior, he writes. We know that it is easy to preach prejudice and hatred. Individuals and communities of people successfully teach hate all the time. But I am passionately convinced that we can also teach empathy and altruism at home and in our schools and in our churches, where we have a captive audience. He was talking to me about the church life. We can teach our children to think and act empathetically and compassionately. So if this good doctor was right, and I pray and believe he was, empathy is something we can cultivate and instill and grow in the world, in young people, only by exhibiting it ourselves, however. Kids notice how we live. The bottom line is that our kids and other young people we touch grow up to be empathetic and altruistic adults because they have heard us articulate compassionate values and have then seen us empathetically putting them into action, treating others around us with respect and compassion and care. This is the greatest moral responsibility we have as adults, to express and model empathy and caring for others in our lives. And there's one more important piece of all this: theological beliefs. In her very important book, The Great Transformation, Beginning of Our Religious Traditions, religious historian Karen Armstrong asserts that in the 9th to 2nd century BCE, the so-called axial age, before the birth of Jesus, 4 distinct religious traditions that have continued to nourish humanity to the current day: Confucianism and Taoism in China, Hinduism and Buddhism in India, monotheism in Israel, and philosophical rationalism in Greece, all of which we come from, all moved in response to the violence and inhumanity of their age to articulate, as she says, all 4 of these religious traditions, a new ethic of empathy and compassion toward human beings everywhere. I quote her: "The axial age was pivotal in the spiritual development of humanity. The prophets, mystics, philosophers, and poets of the axial age taught a spirituality of empathy and compassion. They insisted that people must abandon their egoism and greed, violence and unkindness, and embrace respect for the sacred rights of all persons. Each tradition," she goes on, "developed its own formulation of this golden rule. The axial traditions all taught that if people behaved with kindness and generosity to their fellows, they could save the world." And it is out of that that Unitarian Universalism has arisen. As UUs, of course, we flow directly from this. Our spiritual and ethical roots are primarily, yes, Judeo-Christian and humanistic and rational. As a faith, however, we have always taught that the importance of compassion and connection between persons everywhere must be in the forefront. Empathy is indeed a part of why we call ourselves Unitarian Universalists. Universalists who, for the hundreds of years since our founding, have seen and improved the precious, indissoluble universality between all persons, reflected in our 7 principles. Ours is a religious tradition of empathy and connection. And so, with these beliefs close to our hearts, we have everything we need to lead compassionate and ethical and empathetic lives and give those to our children. Indeed, one can say that the primary purpose of religion is to cultivate empathy. Our religion calls us out of the narrow confines of concern for the self to a wider ethic of connection and compassion to people everywhere. That is the substance of religion itself. I want to end this morning by telling an old Hasidic tale told by Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, which reminds us of the power and goodness of empathy. The story goes back to the days of the Roman Empire. A young Jew in his late teens in Jerusalem wanted to journey to the great city of Rome, which was then the bustling capital of the world as he knew it. A terribly exciting, adventurous destination for a young man. His mother, as all mothers are wont to do, protested about all the dangers and difficulties of attempting such a trip. "But how will you manage?" she asked the boy. "What will you eat? Where will you sleep?" Her adolescent son, of course, didn't really have any satisfactory answers. Yet he persisted, pressing his hope to go to Rome. Finally, his mother relented, saying, "Well, all right, perhaps you will make do finding food and work, but for sleep, please take this pillow I have made, which you will lie your head on each night and find rest." Well, the son eagerly went off on his journey to Rome, and each evening, after enjoying the sights and sounds and sensations of the big city, he would venture out into the quiet countryside beyond the walls of the city with his pillow and his other spare belongings to find a peaceful resting place. It went on like this for many days, but one night, just as he was falling asleep, his pillow burst into flames. It caught fire. Why, Wiesel asks, did the boy's pillow catch on fire? It caught on fire because that night the temple in Jerusalem had burned. And Wiesel explains, it was the flames of empathy and connection which kept the Jewish boy awake that night. Wiesel says that all Jews, no matter how far they may wander from Jerusalem, mystically belong to one another in an indissoluble community of connection and concern. Thus it was empathy, pure and simple, that kept the boy awake that night as the temple burned. So here is the bottom line. Empathy is the most important spiritual and ethical possession any human being can have, because it keeps us awake to and protective of the worth and dignity of other persons, and it increases our own humanity and worth. So, dear friends, may your pillow catch fire. Over your lifetimes, may your hearts grow in their capacity to express and embody empathy for others, no matter how difficult or different they may seem from you. May your pillow catch fire, and may you each evermore become a person who knows deep to your heart of your indissoluble connection to and responsibility for others. May your pillow catch fire, and may empathy, pure and simple empathy, evermore infuse and ennoble your humanity. May your pillow catch fire. Amen.
Please join us in singing our closing hymn, number 1060, As We Sing of Hope and Joy. The words will be in your chat box.
As we sing of hope and joy today, some know only anguish and despair. How can we lift our voices in this way must sing no ordinary song. Peals from a noisy gong will never do. In every breath compassion must belong. Let this song our greatest hopes contain. Laughter of a well-fed child, its tune. Roofs over every heartbeat, its refrain. Its harmony from peaceful cities hewn. Sing of joy while hammering each nail. Sing of hope while pulling every weed. So shall we sing together and prevail. May every alleluia bear a seed.
And I leave you today with these words from St. Paul from his letter to the Romans. All the commandments are summed up in this single command. You must love your neighbor as yourself. Love is the one thing that cannot hurt your neighbor. That is why it is the answer to every one of the commandments. Do not let your love be a pretense, but sincerely prefer good over evil. Love each other as much as brothers and sisters should, and have a profound respect for each other. Treat everyone with equal kindness, never be condescending, but make real friends with the poor. Do not allow yourself to become self-satisfied, but there is more. If your enemy is hungry, you should give him food, and if he is thirsty, you should let him drink. Resist evil and conquer it with good. Amen.
The postlude today is Elite Syncopations by Scott Joplin. I hope you enjoy.
Okay, thank you all for the community of having this beautiful piano, and we hope that we will come all together in this sanctuary to really share and enjoy the joy of the music in here. Words do matter, and appreciation is matter. So, Jesse, thank you for your special music and your talents. Cynthia, thank you for the duet, and as well as your hard hours of really creating music for us every single week. Amen. Yay! Thank you, Linda, for your stories, because I'm never look at the puppy again without barking. And thank you for every, and also thank you, Reverend Scott, for, empathy is compassion is needed, as well as last week when you had fun and joy. So we have to, combine all this as we're endeavoring through this pandemic. We also want to again thank you for the volunteers that are supporting this service today, which is Ron Bracy, David Niemi, Mike Schmitt, and Amelia Turner, as well as our chat Usher, Nonnie Mullins. So thank you for that. And so we invite you, our congregants, to join us on Zoom for our virtual Greet Your Neighbors coffee hour today to discuss the service theme and enjoy fellowship. While we're not together, we can be spiritual together online. The link is in the chat, and use the chat box also as the virtual receiving line to leave a message about your appreciation of all of these, the individuals that are here in the worship today. So stay safe, don't slip on black ice, and empathy, compassion, fun, and joy.